Well, good morning, brethren. Greetings in the name of Jesus on this beautiful Sabbath day. We were visiting this morning about just seemingly how the weather clears up on Sabbath. That may not be always the case, but it's beautiful today. I haven't done this in a while. I haven't revisited an old topic. This is one from 5 years ago, 2018. The thought at the time, it was titled The Great Transgression. The Great Transgression. And there's a feeling about that, brethren, that we ought to desire innocency. We ought to desire freedom. So I have from my previous notebook, I guess I'll be reviewing notes from then, but I also brought in some other items here, and this is to help me to some additional verses that are on some blocks of wood here, just as a way to help. I don't want to miss them. That's the thing. I don't want to miss them. I really do not want to miss these verses. So, the Great Transgression. If we turn to Psalms 19. We go to Psalms 19. Well, I'm going the wrong way. Psalms. I was headed for John, Peter. Okay, so Psalms 119. Psalms 19. Get it straight. Psalms 19. Psalms 19. Psalms 19. Psalms 19. So if we start with verse 7, the law of the Lord is perfect, converting the soul. The testimony of the Lord is sure, making wise the simple. The statutes of the Lord are right, rejoicing the heart. The commandment of the Lord is pure, enlightening the eyes. Enlightening the eyes. The fear of the Lord is clean, enduring forever. The judgments of the Lord are true and righteous altogether. More to be desired are they than gold, yea, than much fine gold, sweeter also than honey and the honeycomb. I'm reminded, brethren, this is a passage, I thought this sounds familiar. Sister Connie James sings this at camp. She's maybe sung it at other places, but she has, yes, I can hear her now from tape. Verse 11, moreover, by them is thy servant warned, and in keeping of them there is great reward. Who can understand his errors? Cleanse thou me from secret faults. Keep back thy servant also from presumptuous sins. Let them not have dominion over me. Then shall I be upright, and I shall be innocent from the great transgression. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. The definition of, so here in verse 13, keep back thy servant also from presumptuous sins. The word presumptuous I looked that up last night. The definition, according to the first one that I saw on Google's search, of a person or their behavior failing to observe the limits of what is permitted or appropriate. There's also the idea of being overconfident, and it used this word a lot in different circumstances or translations or dictionaries. The word arrogant kept popping up. So, innocent from the great transgression. Another word for that transgression in this context, if I recall, is the word rebellion. Rebellion. And it seems that is what man has done, as I guess you could say, from day one, rebellion. Something about man that has not listened or hearkened to his Maker. His Maker. So, last time I spoke on this, the next question that I wrote down here is, transgression is what? And I had written down, read definition. So the one that I used at the time was 1 John 3:4. 1 John 3:4. We may recognize that one. Whosoever committeth sin transgresseth also the law, for sin is the transgression of the law. Transgression, there's transgressing the law. If you do I guess you could use your Strongs on that. There's another word that's also used there, a root word called anomia. I believe Brother Kenneth Walker mentioned that in one of his sermons at McAlester. Or it might be in the literature that he sends out, the Missouri Watchman. And anomia basically means anti-law, or against law, anti-law, without law. And that's, we do talk about things that are happening in the world, calamities, and the things are still just happening. People are without law. They're without the law of God. They're without the law of Christ. We see it. We feel it. We see it and feel it in our world. The whole planet over. If we were to even consider the Ten Commandments up there, I at the time I had been thinking, okay, the Ten Commandments. We would consider that a perfect law of liberty. Right morals given by the Creator. An overall governance of how we live, how we are different human beings on this planet. The Ten Commandments. If I recall, the Ten Commandments, did He not say that He would write them, and put them in our minds and write them on our heart? So they have a number of words. Starting with, don't worship any other god but Him. And just going right on down. At the time I had focused on the Sabbath day. It being a fair amount of words. Remember the Sabbath day. When we remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. It seems to me that we remember our Creator. We are remembering God Almighty. And it should not, I find it strange that the Sabbath, it shouldn't be a surprise, it can't be a surprise to us every week. If we are of a certain lifestyle, it should be of no surprise that, oh, here's the Sabbath, and I didn't prepare. Isn't that something? That it snuck up on us. And all of a sudden we don't have something to eat. So I'm going to go out to the restaurant. No. No. People, like Pastor Walker mentioned in one of the sermons, I revisited one of his on the podcast yesterday. Why we exist as a church, and he specifically, why we exist as the Church of God Seventh Day. And he said, have you ever asked yourself that question? Have you asked yourself that question? And I think to myself, have you ever asked yourself the question, why do we obey the commandments of God? Why do we literally obey, or why do we literally believe the words out of His mouth? And there was nothing wrong with the ones that were put on stone the first time that Moses broke. He wrote them again. So, in the Great Transgression. Then I went to James 2:10. If we go to James 2:10. See, brethren, if I recall it, I was trying to drill down, I guess you could say. I was really trying to drill down. I was after this thing, the Great Transgression. Okay, James, you're probably there already. I am not. James 2:10. Okay. James wrote, for whosoever shall keep the whole law, yet offend in one point, he is guilty of all. Seems to me that there is an equality here. A whole intact set. And what I'm doing is so on this camera angle right here, what I'm doing, if anyone else watches this, I'm looking at the 10 Commandments that are hanging on the wall at this church. And it's the very same set of 10 Commandments that is at McAlester, at the McAlester church. And other churches have the 10 Commandments up. Actually, the 10 Commandments, if I recall, used to be at a certain Capitol building and taken away. So guilty in one point, offended in one point, he is guilty of all. In verse 11, for he that said, do not commit adultery, said also, do not kill. Now, if thou commit no adultery, yet if thou kill, thou art become a transgressor of the law. So, being mindful of this lifestyle, and in keeping of the commandments, and seemingly judging what is right at all times. I like the idea of having the good conscience towards God. Conscience. There's something about that. Always thinking about the good Lord. Always thinking about our Maker. Because there's I guess you could say a bit of a warning where it says God is not always in His thoughts. That man is not always thinking about his Creator. So 1 point, guilty of all. Offended, 1 point, guilty. I was like, the Great Transgression. Still, I was wondering, what is the transgression? Which is it? Which is it? I look at the list on the wall. Which is it? In John, the little Johns, if we first turn to 1 John. 1 John chapter 5 and verse 17. All unrighteousness is sin. So which is it? It doesn't sound like it's very specific here. All unrighteousness is sin. So the Great Transgression. So transgression, back in Psalms 19:13, one of the word meanings there for that transgression is, I mentioned it before, rebellion. So this may be one in 1 Samuel, this may be one that, 1 Samuel 15, this may be one that we have talked about before, studied, considered. Okay. 15. 1 Samuel 15. Yes. Did Saul do something here? He was told to, in verse 9, he was told to get rid of the Amalekites, if I recall here. In verse 9, 1 Samuel 15:9, Saul spared Agag and the best of the goodies, I guess you could say. There was supposed to be a cleansing. And was it Samuel that said, "Why am I hearing these noises? Why am I hearing?" He should not have been hearing animals that were still alive, still living. In verse 23, for rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft, and stubbornness is as iniquity and idolatry. Brethren, it sounds like a whole laundry list here. That is not good. Because thou hast rejected the word of the Lord, he hath also rejected thee from being king. It may seem just like the little things. It may seem just like the little things. Do you recall when the Almighty told Moses to speak to the rock and the water would come? Now imagine that scene. Moses goes up. He was told, go to the rock. What can I use? Speaker box over there, maybe? Or back there. Go to the rock and speak to it. Go to the rock and speak to it. Not go to the rock. You just think about it. Do you catch that? He very specific in his instruction. So specific. And when he says something once, twice, 3 times, was it Brother Carl Palmer? Did he mention one of his sermons? Might have been. I think it was. I don't know if it was Brother Pastor Walker or Carl Palmer that said. It was one of the old ministers. It was one or the other. I know we have old ministers here too. Okay, that's okay. Today? Okay. That he told, that basically the Almighty, he said something once. He only needed to say it one time. We find that back here in the garden. Isn't this something back here in, he told Adam and Eve of a certain tree, do not. And in Genesis 3, this is just another thought that Genesis 3:6, and the woman saw that the tree was good for food. So here we are. So she saw that the tree was good for food. Okay, so you see it in a different light, or you start to consider, you start to reflect, you start to ponder and think upon it. Saw that it was good, because she got a little inkling from a serpent here, from the devil. Just gave her a nudge or gave her something to consider, absolutely lied to her. But does that, brethren, when that wrong seed takes root, when it manifests, when that wrong thinking grows within you, and it's not rejected, and we allow that to fester, and that the tree was good, and that it was pleasant to the eye, so it just, something is swirling on the inside here, brethren, and that was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree to be desired, to make one wise. And when the ultimate of the ultimate happens, she took the action. She took of the fruit and did eat and gave unto her husband. And he did eat. Just seemingly little examples. So here Saul, and back in 1 Samuel 15, Saul, haughtiness, pride. When we think we know better, when we think we've got it figured out, or we know better. We think oh yes. So there's another idea where this can be, you can dovetail into the topic and the idea of children of disobedience. Children of disobedience, and that's mentioned in Ephesians 2, 5, 6, Colossians 3, 6. So now we're talking, I guess we've gone into man, I guess could be selfish. The Great Transgression. Man is it. Man is selfish. It's all about man. Thou shalt not have no other gods before me. Man, the agency of man, seemingly the kingdom of man within himself. And we see that all over the people doing whatever is right in their own eyes. So there's a high-mindedness that we're warned of in Romans 11. Romans 11, verse 20. I do like to repeat the scriptures often, and I may not get to everything. But sometimes we're slow on the dial or slow on the page turning. I know sometimes I am. Romans 11, verse 20. Well, because of unbelief, they were broken off. So we're talking about heritage, I guess you could say. The natural branches, the wild olive tree being grafted into the faith, into the faith, and the faith being of Christ. Boast, verse 18, boast not against the branches, but if thou boast, thou bearest not the root, but the root thee. Thou wilt say then, the branches were broken off, that I might be grafted in. Well, because of unbelief they were broken off, and thou standest by faith. Be not high-minded, but fear, for if God spared not the natural branches, take heed. We mentioned that this morning. That's one of my favorite passages, or favorite phrase. Take heed, lest he also spare not thee. I actually did not realize this was right here. The next verse. We were talking this morning about a particular thing that's in the Sabbath School lesson that we are questioning whether or not that should be there, that phrase, and then we're talking about some maybe doctrines or understandings that have been carried over, some lineage of the Church of God Seventh Day, and people may be holding on to that. I'm talking worldwide Church of God or some other things. And the idea of being superior. Thinking superior. Behold, therefore, the goodness and severity of God, in verse 22, on them which fell severity, but toward thee goodness, if thou continue in his goodness. Otherwise, brethren, I have to believe in this. Otherwise, thou also shalt be cut off. I was thinking about that earlier. I don't want to be cut off, brethren. I don't want to be cut off. So, brethren, I tell you, there is faith, there's hope, there's love, there's forgiveness with the good Lord. He wants us to be in His good graces. But it has to be His way. He knows what's best. He sent His Son. He knows what's best. We can't trust in our own self. Absolutely. We cannot. Well, that's quite interesting because what I just mentioned, these are actually the next notes. These are the next notes. Okay, so the Great Transgression. Is there a higher calling, brethren? The Great Transgression. Is there something greater here? If we look at Christ's words, if we go to Mark chapter 12, Mark chapter 12. See, here on, I guess, about 5 years ago, I was basically narrowing it down. I was getting down here to the bottom line. I was narrowing it down. Which at the same time, brethren, I have to wonder, if you narrow it down to a specific transgression, a specific law point, are we actually going up the different way? Are we going here we go. Are we going a different direction? In Mark 12, and verse, we'll start at 29. And Jesus answered him, the first of all the commandments is, hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord, and thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, and with all thy mind, M-I-N-D, mind, and with all thy strength. This is the first commandment. Okay. So if we don't care about who the Maker is and what saith the Almighty, is this it right here, brethren? Is this it? Is this the great transgression? To not love Him, to not obey with everything about us. Everything about us. And the second is like, namely this, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. There is none other commandment greater than, isn't that something? There is none other singular commandment greater than, plural, these. You just think about that. That's your whole life, brethren. That's all of humanity. And that is defined by the Maker. Absolutely. Who we worship and how we treat everyone else. How we treat everyone else. To him that knoweth to do good and doeth it not, to him it is sin. How we treat. So what kind of words are we willing to tell people? Are we willing to repeat these words? Are we willing to say the name Jesus Christ and not be ashamed of it. Not be ashamed of him. Well, okay. Okay, let's try this. Okay. The Great Transgression. Oh, I need my topic here. The Great Transgression. In Genesis 39:9. Was this Joseph? Was that Joseph? So Genesis 39, because he said something about his master's wife. You know, she was trying to lay hold on him, have her way with him. Let's see, 39:9. And it came to Joseph, yes, and it came to pass as she spake to Joseph day by day that he hearkened not unto her, to lie by her, to be with her. And it came to pass that Joseph, about this time, that Joseph went into the house to do his business, and there was none of the men in the house therewith. And she caught him by his garment. She said, "Lie with me." In verse, is it 12 or 13? Let's see. No, have I missed it here? What I'm after is great wickedness. I may have... Okay, it's actually 9. There it is. "There is none greater in this house than I. Neither hath he kept," his master of the house, "neither hath he kept back anything from me but thee," but you, his wife, the woman. "Because thou art," well, here it says, "because thou art his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God?" Isn't that a testimony back to her? A heathen that's wanting to do the lust of the flesh and to, I guess you could say in a way, take him down. Great wicked. So was adultery, was that the great transgression? Let's see. Exodus 32. There was something, I think, here in Exodus 32 that was there a build-up here in Exodus 32 around verse 27? In Exodus 32, you may remember the story, the scene where in verse 23 they said, the children of Israel, "Make us gods which shall go before us." They wanted something, yes, that they could. Didn't that just... And brethren, I've got pieces of wood here, and these are not my God. Absolutely. Because they're not. This is plywood that is just, and it's just cut. This is a sliver of an oak. You know, I shaved it off, and it's actually got splinters on it. You don't want to hurt yourself on this. But this is not my maker. So what did they do here? Moses came down, saw that some people were naked. Let's see, where are we at? 27. I'm trying to get to 27. The Lord said, Put every man his sword by his side, and go in and out from the gate to gate throughout the camp, and slay every man his brother." And he wanted to get sin stopped. And judgment was happening here, brethren. This is not good. There's a, what do you call it? Consequences for your actions happening right here. And in verse 28, there fell of the people that day 3,000. So what happened? What did he say here? Moses say in verse 30, "And it came to pass on the morrow, the next day, that Moses said unto the people, Ye have sinned a great sin." Ye have sinned a great sin. So idolatry, it's all wrapped up, seemingly. Idolatry, unbelief, unfaithfulness. Now, would you know that recently, and I shared this at home, in religion, I can't help but think of the elephant in the room. there are quite a few hot push button topics that religion can take an interest in and really talk about it, but it doesn't seem to go further. Seemingly there's things that we're barely scratching the surface. Eons and eons of false worship have been handed down and piled upon humans. Pagan practices. So, I thought it was very interesting. 60 Minutes did you can see it on YouTube. They did a segment or whatever, and it's like 20-something minutes long, I think. And you catch the headline, and it was a week or two ago, Whistleblower, Mormon Church. Mormon, whistleblower. And so this man is talking about the $100-and-something billion that the Mormon Church is worth, and it goes into the certain fund. He says money goes in, nothing comes out. Supposed to be doing good for people. And so that makes the headlines. And it's just one thing after another, and the man that was being interviewed, the one of the lead, they call it a bishop, was being, I guess you could say, sketchy, would kind of like beating around the bush around to the reporter's question. And the news. They take take footage shots, and they had this thing they showed this building. I guess it's called the Temple. And I'm thinking, a whole bunch of people in this thing. And I said, I didn't realize what that was. But my daughter the Temple. I'm thinking, okay, well, I didn't know that. But I showed them this. I showed her this little segment because she has friends that are involved in this, or had friends. She's had acquaintances. And so when you have a news agency, well known, talking about fraud, and they throw out this big $1 billion number, and so I'd ask the question, so why don't they go for the jugular here, and why don't they talk about the Catholic Church? The billions or trillions of dollars in control. I know there's stages and platforms where it seems that you can go off. You can be a follower, not a leader, but a follower after other movements that are talking about homosexuality, different sins, what man is doing, playing around with genderism and all such things. Again, are we barely scratching the surface? Because we don't want to talk about other things like paganism. That's not popular, especially not in this country. And false work, things that are handed down. But what is interesting, at the same time, you can watch a very recent video about the flood and how this man, using science to talk about the flood, and how even a fish swallowing another fish, he said the word catastrophe numerous times on this, and he's before an audience. What he was getting at, brethren, is the biblical narrative, which is anti-vanity. It's anti this thing called Darwinism. It's anti-millions and billions and whatever years. The truth, the truth, the Almighty, He spells things out. He spells things out. And for this man to use science and clear reasoning. What caught me, though, was he mentioned the word catastrophe. He mentioned how quickly it was. that even an animal was giving birth to another animal and were covered up. Covered up. Talking about how from continents to continents. It's an interesting thing where they show, and they call it the geological thing, where in the record you have a sudden line. He pointed out, you have got these layers of these fossils right here. But if there was such a thing as, and it starts at a certain line around the earth, you won't find that record below that. A previous record below that. Anyway. Okay, so that led me to this. In Genesis 6:5, the Great Transgression. The Great Transgression. And it repented the Lord that he made man on the earth. This is Genesis 6:5. And it repented. Well, actually, verse 5. I should not negate this. And God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. Only evil. I don't see the word good there. Only evil, and how often? Continually. Now I have to ask the question, are we to that point in this day and age? For as in the days of Noah, so shall it be in the coming of the Son of Man. I believe Jesus said that. I believe that's Christ's words. Are we in a culture where it's only evil continually? Okay, so the Great Transgression. Was that the Great Transgression? Or do we weigh sin? Do we weigh sins in a balance? It's an interesting thing that what Jesus said in John 19. John chapter 19. Jesus is speaking to Pilate. John 19 and verse 11. 19. Well, Pilate said to Jesus, then Pilate said to him, speak, in John 19:10, then Jesus saith unto Pilate, speakest thou not unto me? Knowest thou not that I have power to crucify thee, and the power to release thee? Jesus said, he answered, thou couldst have no power at all against me, except it were given thee from above. Therefore, he that hath delivered me unto thee hath the greater sin. Is Jesus saying here that Judas had the greater sin? I don't see where Pilate here was called a saint. The greater sin. That Jesus said that. I'd like to transition over to this block of wood. I have one verse, Titus 3:8. The Great Transgression. Titus 3:8. Titus 3:8. This is a faithful saying, and these things I will that you affirm constantly, that they which have believed in God might be careful to maintain good works. These things are good and profitable unto men. But avoid foolish questions and genealogies and contentions and strivings about the law, for they are unprofitable and vain. A man that is an heretic, after the first and second admonition, reject. Knowing. Now someone is knowing something here. And Titus, this is Paul telling Titus, knowing that there's a knowledge here, knowing that he that is such is subverted and sinneth, being condemned of himself. So what I was after here is back in verse 8, that thou affirm constantly that they which have believed in God. Believed in God. We have to believe in God. There's none other to believe in. And it's going to cause you to want to do something. Might be careful to maintain good works. Might be careful. Last night, it was like midnight. I dozed off for a little bit. I was up, dozed off. Anyway, it was busy in the living room. I went out there, and I didn't have my glasses on, so it was like this, which it's a blur. And so anyway, I forgot what I was going out there after. It was this. That's right. It was these. So when I went out there, I couldn't tell. It was actually Emma, my daughter. I was talking to her, and I couldn't help but mention
Take that gray mic and swap the batteries out.
Or just turn it on?
Or turn it on, I guess.
Well, it is on. Oops.
Is it on?
It's on.
Okay.
It's on. 1, 2. Or I can take the battery out?
If you want to keep using the...
Well, it shouldn't take too long, should it? 1 Peter 2:2 is where we're going to be going, brethren. That was loud. Okay. 1 Peter 2:2. And the reason for this, at 1 Peter 2:2, was I'd been looking into the idea of doing some working with wood, and there's some characteristics of wood. I'm not, thank you very much. I'm not a studier of nature per se, but there's something about new growth. And what was mentioned is that when you see rings and new growth and these knots of limbs coming out, the character, brethren, the character of wood, that I was told, or what this man was telling on the YouTube, there's a lot of energy being pushed, and he used this motion, a lot of energy that's going in to that new growth. And I thought, that is interesting. So when I was visiting with my daughter last night, and I thought my son was in the living room, but he was not. My wife was there, and I couldn't help but mention 1 Peter 2:2. And I didn't say it was 1 Peter 2:2. I had to go back and look it up. That's 2 Peter. I need 1 Peter 2:2. And so what I mentioned... Okay, 1 Peter 2:2, not 1:2. Yes, as newborn babes. I was trying to illustrate that. As newborn babes, desire the sincere milk of the word that you may grow thereby. And so I was after the ring. I was after the growth. And so that's what I mentioned. Well, so I was trying to get my point across on that. And my son, he was wondering, what do you mean milk? He said, you said milk. And that's what the Bible says. Right here it is. We can read that for ourselves. As newborn babes, brethren, when there's new life. And if you're new, His power is going to go into you. Walk in newness of life. His power goes into you. He wants to build you up and nurture you. Desire the sincere milk of the word that you may grow thereby. And so, as it turns out, that other person that was in the living room was not my son. He came around the corner. That was actually his girlfriend. And because I didn't have my glasses on, I couldn't tell it was her. When we were starting to talk a little bit more about this, there was a little bit of apprehension of hearing this, wanting to, and I was told, well, it's curfew. It's curfew. Like, we don't want to hear it. But would you know that the young lady, she was interested. She stopped. She thought that was interesting. Let's go to, I'll just mention it. So on this block of wood, I wanted to put the more, I guess to take it to, another level, I wanted to put the Great Transgression. Well, what I mentioned about Moses taking the stick or whatever and hitting the rock. There's something that the Almighty said. This is in Numbers 20, 8 through 12. There's something that He said. The Almighty told Moses that essentially that He did not sanctify him, did not obey to sanctify me, is what He says. Now, brethren, is that a great transgression? That really is a great transgression. In Hebrews 3:19, it tells us that the children of Israel, so many of them, brethren, they could not enter in because of unbelief. They could not enter in. The great transgression. What is the opposite of the great transgression? What is opposite? Is there a great healing? Is there great mercy? Is there great deliverance? We're told in the New Testament to overcome evil with good. To overcome evil with good. So there is the possibility of overcoming great transgression. Great transgression, brethren, can mean a multitude of transgression, like an amount. A whole lifetime, a whole nation full of transgression. So it may not be necessarily just one commandment outwent this, that, and the other, which all boils down to, at the bottom, the summary of the commandments. A great transgression could be the whole heap of it. The whole heap of unbelief, of people forgetting their Maker, forgetting their God. So, overcome evil with good. The good news, He did already. He made a way. The Almighty, He provided the way through Jesus Christ. So how great is this? If we turn to Ephesians 2:4. Ephesians 2:4. This will be my closing verse. Ephesians 2:4. But God, who is rich in mercy, for His great love, wherewith He loved us, even when we were dead in sins, hath quickened us together with Christ. By grace are ye saved. His great love, brethren, we can't do it of ourselves. The great transgression, the opposite, His great love. Isn't that is just far beyond. It's just far beyond our reasoning, our reckoning. But we thank the good Lord for His truth, His mercy, and thank you, brethren. May God bless.